The moment her champagne flute clinked against a stranger's, and she cackled. "Oh, Graham? He's just the money man. Always has been." I realized I could burn the whole room down with a smile. Not literally. That would have been too merciful. I was standing 20 feet away, watching my wife glow under the flattering haze of her boutique launch party lighting, surrounded by faux friends and opportunistic designers. Tessa had built a kingdom on my credit, my patience, and my silence. And now, I was a footnote, a man-shaped ATM, a prop at her party. A journalist laughed awkwardly at her comment. "Money man? That's romantic." Tessa rolled her eyes. "He doesn't mind. Graham's not really into fashion or people. He just signs things." That line landed harder than she knew. I sipped my mineral water and set the glass down. Slowly, deliberately, not a flicker of rage on my face. That's what confused people the most. I didn't react, not the way they expected, but inside, something shifted. Not a break, a pivot. The entire boutique had been decorated in white orchids, her favorite, which was funny, considering she was allergic to them a decade ago. She reinvented herself so many times, even her immune system couldn't keep up. I walked out of the party early, told no one, not even her. My coat still smelled faintly of the cheap scent they pumped into the venue air vents, fig and bergamot, probably imported from somewhere that treats vanity like religion. Back at home, in the room she jokingly called the museum, my office, I slid open the bottom drawer she never touched. Behind an old Rolodex and a cracked leather-bound planner from the 90s, sat a plain brown folder. Dusty, unremarkable, and more powerful than anyone in that boutique had any clue. Inside, the Claremont Legacy Trust documents. Original copies. Notarized. My grandfather's crest embossed on the corner. And stapled to the front. A yellowing copy of the prenup she'd insisted we skip over on our wedding day because, in her words, "You're not the kind of man I'd divorce." Right. Clause 14 stared back at me like an old friend. A sentence I hadn't thought about in years. All investments made using funds from the Claremont Trust shall revert to the trust in full upon dissolution of marriage. I whispered it out loud, just to hear it. Revert to the trust. So technically, she didn't own anything. Not the brand. Not the logos. Not even the rent-controlled warehouse in Soma. She just ran it. A smart man once told me, the most powerful thing you can do with a knife isn't stabbing. It's letting the other person realize they're holding the blade against themselves. That night, I didn't sleep. Not from rage or heartbreak. I didn't feel either. Just clarity. The kind that comes when you realize your silence wasn't weakness, it was strategy. So here's the part they don't tell you. When a man is mocked enough times, when his name becomes a punchline at parties he paid for, he starts to count in hours, not years. I sat at my desk until 3:14 a.m. By then, I'd read every clause twice, scanned the documents to a secure drive, and made 3 phone calls. One to my old estate attorney, one to the Claremont Trust's compliance officer, and one to a man named Silas, whose only job is making things vanish quietly. Stores, names, reputations. If you're still reading, you might be one of the 90% who listen but never subscribe. That's fine. But if you're the kind of person who's ever been laughed at while holding someone else's dreams together, consider subscribing. It keeps the team motivated, and we've got more stories than Tessa has boutiques. Back to her. The next morning, she came home around 11, eyes puffy but smiling. The launch was amazing. I think we're finally getting some real traction. Natalie introduced me to a guy from Milan. I nodded. You look like you were enjoying yourself. She didn't notice the edge. Or maybe she did, and assumed it was jealousy. That night, she fell asleep next to me as if nothing had changed, snoring softly, reeking of too much rose and too much attention. Meanwhile, in a secure Dropbox folder titled Clause 14, I had begun assembling what would become her undoing. She used to say I was boring, predictable, reliable. She was right, and that's exactly what made me dangerous. The divorce papers landed on my desk with the grace of a guillotine. Couriered, of course. Tessa never missed a chance to outsource her dirty work. Inside, the demands read like a shopping list written in lipstick. 50% of all shared property, including our Monterey home. Half the retirement portfolio. Joint stake in the boutique brand and licensing rights. Spousal support, commensurate with lifestyle. It was almost cute, how confidently she assumed I'd roll over. I didn't respond right away. I waited 3 days, just long enough for her attorney to think I was panicking. Then I requested a meeting. We sat across from each other at a firm downtown. Her lawyer, some self-satisfied former prosecutor named Dean Rutherford, grinned like this was a formality. He did most of the talking. Tessa just smiled, arms folded like she was already decorating her new condo. Dean began with an unnecessary monologue about fairness, about honoring the years she invested in the brand, about her visible leadership and emotional labor. I didn't interrupt. I just nodded along and let him enjoy his performance. Then, when he finally asked if I had anything to add, I said exactly one sentence. Have you reviewed the trust-protected prenup? The air shifted. Tessa's smile faltered. What prenup? She asked, sharp-clipped. I didn't respond to her. I just opened my briefcase and handed Dean a copy. He took it with a smirk, then flipped the first page, and his entire posture changed. His face drained, pupils flicking like he was trying to solve a riddle written in blood. It's notarized, he muttered. And binding. Tessa leaned over. Let me see that. Dean tried to stop her, but she grabbed it. Her lips moved silently as she skimmed. I could tell the moment she reached clause 14 because her eyes widened and darted toward me. She knew I'd been patient for years, but she never thought I'd been watching. Preparing. This is ridiculous, she snapped. This can't be real. You never even mentioned this prenup. I leaned back, folded my hands. My grandfather insisted before we got married. Said the family name needed protection. I gave it to you in the stack with the marriage license. You signed. I watched you. No, I didn't, she began, but Dean raised a hand. Don't, he said quietly. Tessa looked at him, confused. What? It's legally sound, he said. Signed. Witnessed. Filed. She looked at me like I'd become someone else. But I hadn't. I was the same man who quietly paid for her first storefront, who signed her credit card bills with a smile while she called me just the money man. Only now, she was realizing that the money had a name, and that name didn't belong to her. You're bluffing, she hissed. You wouldn't do this. You wouldn't try to cut me out of something I built. I shrugged. You didn't build it. You curated it. Like an art gallery with someone else's paintings. Dean exhaled. Miss Keating. She's still using my last name, I corrected gently. For now. Dean cleared his throat. Miss Keating, your husband's right. The prenup puts everything under the Claremont Trust. Legally, you were managing trust assets. You never held ownership. Tessa's nails tapped against the chair. Rapid, uneven. A nervous tell. You're trying to humiliate me, she said. No, I replied. That part comes later. She stood abruptly. We'll fight it. This won't hold. Dean didn't move. It'll hold. I stood too. Straightened my jacket. Looked her in the eyes. You made a brand out of pretending to be self-made. But the truth is, Tessa, everything you touched came from someone you never respected. Outside, I called my compliance guy again. Told him to move forward with step 2. Tessa thought this was a negotiation. She didn't realize it was an autopsy. If Tessa had ever bothered to read the monthly disclosures I forwarded to her inbox, every first Monday, like clockwork, she might have noticed the signature line said Claremont Legacy Trust. Not Graham Keating. Not even our joint LLC. Just the trust. Every time, she thought she was building an empire. In reality, she was just managing inventory. The boutique leases? Trust-owned. Vendor contracts? Issued by a shell company 2 layers deep in the Claremont structure. Payroll? Paid through Claremont Holdings West. Routed via an account she didn't even know existed. All legal. All compliant. All invisible, if you weren't looking for it. The trust had been established in 1964 by my grandfather, Rupert Keating, a man who believed in 3 things: discretion, legacy, and leverage. His lawyers built it like a labyrinth, airtight, interlocking clauses, and a fortress of fiduciary language that made even divorce-proof wealth look like monopoly money. Clause 14 wasn't just protection. It was revenge insurance. Tessa always said she didn't do paperwork, that she was a vision person, which worked fine, as long as the vision didn't crash into reality. Now reality was kicking in the front door. Dean, the elite attorney she bragged about to her Pilates group, sat in stunned silence across from me, holding the prenup like it had personally betrayed him. This clause, he murmured, it doesn't just revert the funds. It reclassifies all business assets funded with trust capital as non-marital property. Tessa narrowed her eyes. What does that mean? Dean hesitated. It means you have no claim to the boutiques, or their profits, or the trademark. Her face went blank. I took a slow sip of water. You always said I was just the money man, I said. Turns out the money had strings. She lunged forward, snatching the document from him, flipping through pages with a frantic energy, like she could find a loophole if she turned fast enough. This can't be right, she muttered. I had equity. Natalie signed over a 10% share last year. We filed a partnership agreement. Filed it with who? I asked, feigning curiosity. Not the trust, and not the Secretary of State. You filed it with your email inbox and a bottle of rose. Dean leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temple. You should have disclosed this before we filed, he said to her. I didn't know, she snapped. I watched her unravel, like a thread being pulled from her favorite overpriced cashmere sweater. What about the Beverly Hills store? She asked. The one I flew to open, signed the lease for. Signed the sublease, I corrected. The master leaseholder is Claremont Holdings. The sublease was month to month, and conveniently expired last week. She looked like she'd been slapped. Tessa had walked through her life thinking she owned the palace. But the keys were always in my pocket. I'm not walking away with nothing, she said finally, her voice low and shaking. You can't just take it all. I'm not taking anything, I replied. I'm simply letting the trust reclaim its assets. That's what it's designed to do. Dean stood up slowly, eyes still locked on the clause. He's right. It's airtight. She looked between us like she'd wandered into a foreign country and suddenly couldn't read the signs. You don't get to do this, she said to me. I shrugged. You got the spotlight. I got the paperwork. The meeting ended quietly after that. Dean asked for copies. I'd already brought extras. By the time I walked out into the afternoon sun, she was still sitting there, stunned. The world she thought she built wasn't just slipping through her fingers. It had never been in her hands at all. It started with a phone call she ignored, then an email she never opened, then a silent alarm she triggered herself when she tried to swipe into her own flagship store and the card reader blinked red. By the time she realized something was wrong, half the boutiques were already transitioning, quietly, legally, without fanfare. Tessa had always loved the flagship store on Grant Street. Marble floors, high archways, minimalist displays. Her name was everywhere, except where it actually mattered. The deed, the lease, the ownership line. I had it all queued up. The trust executed the plan like clockwork. One by one, new general managers were installed. The leases, held by Claremont Holdings, were restructured with updated operational mandates. The vendors were issued notification letters with the new point of contact. Bank accounts were frozen, then redirected. And then, the locks changed. I made sure it happened before she had her second espresso. At 9:06 a.m., Tessa pulled up in her white Jaguar and walked toward the boutique like she owned the sidewalk. She wore her usual uniform, high-waisted wool trousers, oversized sunglasses, and the kind of confidence that comes from not knowing how thin the ice really is. The store was lit. Staff moved around inside. Customers were already browsing. Everything looked normal, until her key card didn't work. She tried again, then again. The door didn't budge. Inside, the assistant manager, a young guy named Leo who had once nearly fainted when she complimented his display layout, walked up to the glass, confused. Tessa knocked. Hard. He opened the door an inch. Miss Keating, why is my card not working? She snapped. Let me in. Leo hesitated. I was told not to. By who? He motioned behind him. A man in a tailored navy suit stepped forward. Bald, calm, clipboard in hand. I'd met him once. Miles, one of the trust's transition agents. She's not authorized anymore, Miles said flatly. Tessa laughed, sharp and shrill. Excuse me. Miles didn't flinch. Ma'am, your managerial access was revoked as of 7 a.m. today. You're welcome to schedule a meeting with the trust's representative, but you're not permitted on premises. She looked around, realizing people were watching. Customers, a woman walking her dog. Even the barista across the street had paused mid-pour. My name is on the branding, she hissed. I built this from scratch. I know every light fixture in this place. Miles flipped a page on his clipboard. You managed the operations. You did not own the assets. All stores, inventory, trademarks, and associated materials fall under Claremont Legacy Trust. That includes this location. You're mistaken, she said, trying to push the door. He held firm. No, ma'am. You are. Her voice cracked. These are my stores. No, he said, louder this time. They're the trust's assets. Always were. That's when the panic started to show. She fumbled for her phone, called her assistant. Straight to voicemail. She texted Natalie. No reply. She dialed Dean. Busy. The door clicked shut. Tessa stood there, shaking, humiliated on a sidewalk she once called her runway. She'd spent years curating her empire. But it turns out empires built on illusion collapse faster than most. By noon, 2 more stores had locked her out. By the next morning, her company email account was deactivated. Her name removed from the company site. Her login to the wholesale dashboard? Gone. I didn't say a word. Didn't gloat. I just watched it all happen from my study, where every alert and approval came to my inbox. She once told a journalist, "I don't believe in paper trails. I believe in vision." The Claremont Trust believes in both. Tessa once said that Natalie was ride or die. That if the world ended tomorrow, they'd be clinking wine glasses in a bunker, already planning their next launch. But when the walls started closing in, Natalie didn't show up with a lifeline. She showed up with a lawyer. It was 2 days after the flagship humiliation when Tessa finally called her. She tried to sound breezy, fake a laugh, toss in an inside joke about the trust Nazis, but Natalie didn't even chuckle. "I got your message," she said, her voice thin and brittle. "I didn't know things were like this." Tessa pounced. "It's a misunderstanding. A technicality, really. Graham's just bitter. He's pulling strings to humiliate me. You know how he is. Always 3 spreadsheets deep. Never in the room when it matters." Natalie was silent for a beat. Then, "You never told me Graham funded the original Capital." Tessa flinched like she'd been slapped. "He didn't. Not directly. He just facilitated some of the paperwork. But the vision, the branding, the tone, that was all me. You know that." Another silence. Natalie exhaled. "Look, when I invested in the 3rd store, I assumed we were working from clean ownership, that your name was on the title. But now legal's telling me everything was funneled through a legacy trust with retroactive clawback clauses. That makes me vulnerable. No, this is temporary." Tessa insisted, talking faster now. "I'm already assembling a legal team. Once we challenge the prenup." "You signed it, Tessa." "I didn't know what I was signing. It was years ago." He slipped it in with the license papers like some bureaucratic trap. Natalie's tone hardened. "Be honest. You didn't read it." Tessa didn't respond. "My firm's distancing," Natalie continued. "We're pulling any references to your name from our portfolio until this resolves. I suggest you do the same with any future press. Quiet the narrative." "Wait, are you serious?" "You're backing out." "I'm protecting my company. You should do the same." The line went dead. No goodbyes. No bunker. Just static. Tessa stared at her phone, mouth open. Her fingers trembled slightly as she tried texting 2 other mutuals. Jasmine, who'd once sworn she'd go to war for her, and Kara, who helped design the original flagship layout. No replies. Not even the little scene notification. She switched to Instagram. Jasmine had unfollowed her. Kara had removed the boutiques tag from her portfolio. Tessa closed the app and slumped into the leather armchair Graham used to call the throne. For years, she'd been the epicenter. The sun everyone orbited. Now she was a ghost in her own circle. The silence wasn't just professional. It was personal. No calls. No visits. The espresso machine still made noise in the morning, but there was no one left to drink with. The boutique group chat, a once nonstop stream of gifts, launches, and inside jokes, had gone completely dead. She opened it anyway. Typed, "Hey everyone. Would love to catch up. Let's get drinks soon." No one responded. 30 minutes later, someone quietly left the chat. She didn't bother checking who. The more she tried to claw her way back into relevance, the more invisible she became. It wasn't Graham's revenge that hurt the most. It was how quickly everyone else decided she wasn't worth saving. Divorce hearings are rarely dramatic. No gavel slamming, no shouting matches. Just paperwork, sighs, and the occasional awkward glance between people who used to share a bed. But this one would be etched into courthouse lore. Tessa arrived like it was opening night at an awards gala. Custom charcoal gray wrap dress, diamond studs, hair swept back in a knot so tight, it looked surgically installed. She made sure the courtroom doors didn't open until her attorney, Dean, could walk in first and announce her like a royal entrance. Me? I came alone. No entourage. No performance. Navy suit. Leather folder. And an air of quiet inevitability. She didn't even look at me. Just adjusted her hemline and whispered something to Dean, who gave a reassuring nod. The judge entered. Gavel tapped. Proceedings began. Dean stood and launched into his well-rehearsed litany. "Your Honor, my client is entitled to equitable distribution of the marital assets, including but not limited to the shared real estate portfolio, retirement accounts, business holdings under Claremont Atelier, and future licensing proceeds." He handed over a bound folder that probably took 5 paralegals 2 weeks to compile. The judge opened it, flipped through a few pages with barely restrained boredom. "And Mr. Keating?" I stood, walked forward, pulled a single page from my folder. "One exhibit," I said calmly. The judge raised an eyebrow. "Just one." I nodded. He took the paper, eyes scanning lazily at first, then freezing halfway down. His brow furrowed. He leaned back. then leaned forward again. Silence. And then he started laughing. Not a chuckle, not a polite courtroom smile. A laugh. A deep, dry, almost wheezing laugh that echoed through the room like someone had slipped a joke into a eulogy. Dean's jaw tightened. Your Honor. The judge wiped his eye. Clause 11. Triggered upon intent to divorce. Not filing. Not finalization. Intent. He looked up at Tessa. Ma'am, this clause nullifies all of your claims. Retroactively. As of the date you consulted your attorney. Dean stepped forward, snatched the document. Read. Went pale. Oh my God, he muttered. His pen slipped from his fingers and rolled off the table. He didn't even notice. Tessa looked between them. What does that mean? It means, I said, the moment you met Dean to discuss divorce, every marital claim you had was voided. The trust anticipated financial manipulation and set the clock to start ticking before paperwork could be filed. You were dead in the water before the courier even left your driveway. Dean cleared his throat. Your Honor, surely there's room for interpretation. The judge shook his head, still smiling in disbelief. This isn't a prenup. This is a preemptive surgical strike. I've never seen anything like this. It's ruthless. Tessa rose to her feet. Wait a minute, this isn't fair. I didn't even know that clause existed. The judge gave her a look that could have curdled milk. Ma'am, you initialed it. Right here. In blue ink. You had your own legal counsel. Or at least you signed a waiver saying you declined independent review. Either way, it holds. Dean sat down heavily. She thought he was bluffing. He whispered. Tessa turned to me, wild-eyed. You manipulated me. No, I said evenly. I protected myself. You're the one who came for blood. I just made sure I was wearing armor. The judge tapped his gavel again, more amused than authoritative this time. Court acknowledges the prenup as valid and fully enforceable. All spousal claims are hereby dismissed. Boom. Done. Tessa sat down like someone had pulled the floor out from under her. No empire. No payout. No sympathy. The woman who once hosted luxury panel talks about owning your narrative had just been legally erased from her own chapter. And the worst part for her? It was all done with one page. One sentence. One signature. I didn't need to raise my voice. I just handed over the truth and let gravity do the rest. Tessa didn't show up for the next hearing with the same bravado. Gone were the designer heels and smug smile. This time, she wore all black, mourning her empire, I suppose, and clutched a leather folio like it contained the last threads of her dignity. Her face had changed. Not aged, tightened, hollowed. The kind of look someone gets when the mirror becomes a courtroom and the verdict is written in bone. She sat down across from me without a word. Dean, who had apparently decided to soldier on despite the public disembowelment last week, cleared his throat and began his pitch with the last card they had left. Your Honor, despite the asset complications we've acknowledged, we believe my client is entitled to spousal support given the lifestyle she's maintained over the last 25 years. I didn't move. He kept going. And the long-term sacrifices she's made to prioritize the brand and home while Mr. Keating continued his professional work. The judge raised an eyebrow. Sacrifices? Dean nodded. Yes. Emotional labor. Industry events. She was the face of the company. The judge turned to me. Mr. Keating? I stood up slowly, no fanfare. Just a thin folder in hand. She earns 7 figures, Your Honor. Still holds consulting agreements from pre-dissolution licensing. And now, thanks to the clause enforcement, she has no documented stake in any of my protected assets. The judge looked at Dean. Is that true? Dean hesitated. She had income. Yes, but no spousal support awarded. The judge said flatly, cutting him off. She's not dependent. Next, Tessa blinked like she'd misheard. Wait what? I don't even have access to my accounts right now. He locked everything. I tilted my head. I didn't lock anything. The trust did. You forfeited operational control when you tried to dissolve the marriage. That's not me being cruel. That's just contract law. She turned to Dean, panicked. We have to appeal. But I wasn't finished. Your Honor, I said, if I may enter one additional exhibit into the record. Dean looked up sharply. What exhibit? I placed a tabbed file labeled D on the clerk's desk. The judge flipped it open. His expression shifted from curious to cold in seconds. Inside were emails, screenshots, draft contracts, an itinerary from a private flight to Dubai. Tessa's name was on every page, and so was the Claremont Atelier brand. The emails detailed plans to license the boutique name internationally without trust oversight. No board review, no compliance signatures. Just her, Natalie, before she jumped ship, and a foreign distributor with deep pockets. Projected value, $14.2 million. All in her name, none in the trust's records. The judge slowly looked up. Miss Keating, were you planning to license protected assets under your personal name without approval? Tessa stammered. I was just testing the waters. Nothing was finalized. Intent is enough, I said. Dean leaned forward, squinting at the documents. Where did you get these? I didn't answer. The judge tapped his finger on the page. This is breach of fiduciary duty. You were managing trust assets. These plans violate the terms of your managerial role and constitute a direct conflict of interest. Tessa opened her mouth, then closed it. I sat back down, calm, measured. The courtroom was quiet except for the sound of her breathing, sharp, irregular. Dean finally muttered, Your Honor, may we request a recess? The judge nodded, but his tone had soured. Granted. We'll reconvene tomorrow. But counsel, if this documentation holds, we may need to discuss sanctions. Sanctions. She hadn't just lost the money. She was about to lose the reputation she thought would carry her through the ashes. And the best part? She'd done it to herself. All I did was set the trap. She walked right in, heels first. It began with a logo, a soft serif typeface. Ivory on matte charcoal. Understated, expensive, familiar. Where once her cursive signature sprawled across boutique awnings like royalty, now stood a new name in clean lettering, Claremont & Sons. No ribbon cuttings. No champagne. Just quiet efficiency. One morning, Tessa scrolled through her browser out of habit and typed in the old boutique's domain. It redirected, not to an error page, not to a placeholder, to a fully rebranded site. Same store layouts, same product lines, rephotographed with new lighting, new models, new copy. The tagline hit her like a crowbar to the chest. Built to last. Family funded. Not even subtle. She clicked through the product pages, hoping to find some trace of her. A photo. A blog post. A quote. Nothing. Not a single image. Not a mention. It was as if she'd never existed. And it didn't stop there. The retail locations, Grant Street, Melrose, Bishop Arts, all had new signs installed within weeks. Her signature TK gold plaques were replaced with etched brass plates bearing the Claremont family crest. Her boutiques, her empire, her aesthetic, scrubbed clean like it had been a bad dream someone finally woke up from. Inside her apartment, boxes of unopened mail sat near the door. Invoices from branding agencies, unpaid retainer notices, one letter from a stylist threatening legal action over breach of contract. She poured herself a glass of Pinot and sat in front of her laptop, staring at the site like a widow at a stranger's funeral. Even the product names had changed. Her best-selling Coastal Muse wrap dress, now called the Claremont Classic. Her hand-selected vendors? Replaced. Or absorbed. The fashion press noticed the rebrand, but not her absence. One blog called it a mature evolution of the former TK aesthetic. Another praised the pivot toward family-rooted values. She emailed 3 journalists. No reply. She texted one of the old store managers. The message turned green. Blocked. For a moment, she considered calling Graham. Maybe just to scream. Maybe just to remind him that she wasn't invisible. But then she remembered the last thing he said in court. You got the spotlight. I got the paperwork. Now she had neither. Her old email, tessa@tatelier.com, bounced back undeliverable. Her press kit links were dead. Even her personal Instagram, once a carousel of curated power lunches and limited-run capsule drops, had lost thousands of followers in a week. No comments. No DMs. Just a few stray likes from bots and old interns. She refreshed her inbox. Still nothing. The silence had a shape now. It wasn't passive. It was engineered. No lawsuits. No defamation. No spectacle. She was simply replaced. And that, somehow, was worse. Because Graham didn't need to destroy her to win. He just made sure the story moved on without her. The call came on a Tuesday morning. Tessa had just finished retyping a statement she planned to leak to the press. Something vague about legal misconduct and gendered power structures. It sounded bold in her head, but read like a tantrum. Still, it was all she had. Then her phone rang. Dean Rutherford. She almost didn't pick up, but she needed a win. Any win. Dean, she answered, forcing calm. Tell me you found something. A clause. A loophole. A precedent. His voice was dry, unflinching. We have no grounds to appeal. Silence. What do you mean no grounds? There has to be something. Fraud. Maybe. He concealed information. He didn't. Dean interrupted. The prenup is valid. The trust structure is watertight. Every transaction was recorded, disclosed, and filed. You signed annual summaries for over a decade. I never read them, she whispered. That doesn't matter, he said, flat. Cold. Final. Legally, your signature acknowledges review. The Claremont Trust is premarital property, protected by multiple instruments. Every judge in this state would come to the same conclusion. We're done. She sank into her couch like the weight of the room had changed. You told me I'd get half, she muttered. I told you might, he corrected. Depending on the circumstances. But you didn't tell me who you were dealing with. She blinked. What's that supposed to mean? Dean exhaled. Graham Keating isn't just a quiet husband. He's the executor of a multi-generational trust that's been defending its assets longer than you've been alive. The lawyers behind that trust don't react, Tessa. They prepare. They've been waiting for a challenge like this for 40 years, and when it came, they didn't blink. She gripped the phone tighter. You're blaming me? I'm stating facts. Her voice rose. So that's it. You're abandoning me. I'm closing your file, Dean replied. There's nothing left to pursue. We'd be sanctioned if we tried to push this any further. You were lucky the judge didn't fine you for fiduciary breach. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. For years, she'd paid top dollar for the best. Best stylists, best PR, best legal. But in the end, they all folded. One by one. Dean hesitated before hanging up. For what it's worth, I think you were good at what you did. But you should have known better than to go to war with a man who never raises his voice. Click. Just like that. Gone. Her last ally. She sat in silence, staring at the wall across from her couch. The bottle of wine from the night before still open on the table. The press statement draft on her laptop, cursor blinking like it was waiting to be deleted. Even her reflection in the TV screen looked like it wanted to leave the room. She whispered into the silence, half to herself. I thought he needed me. But she was wrong. He never needed her. She just mistook dependence for leverage. And now she was out of both. The envelope was cream-colored, thick, and unassuming. No return address. No postmark stamp she recognized. It arrived a week after Dean's final call, buried under a pile of marketing flyers and a disconnection notice from her internet provider. Tessa almost threw it out, but something about the weight made her pause. She tore it open on the kitchen counter, next to a crusted wine glass and a half-eaten protein bar she'd mistaken for dinner. Inside, one check, $1, drawn from a Claremont Legacy Trust account, and a card, plain, unbranded. Inside, in ink that was unmistakably Graham's, clean, slanted, almost architectural, one sentence. For services rendered. Payment complete. She froze. Her thumb traced the edge of the paper as her brain struggled to translate what her eyes already understood. She turned the card over. Clipped to the back was a single glossy photo. The kind of photo you couldn't find online. It was her boutique. The flagship. The one she designed down to the cent. And in the photo, two workers were on ladders, unscrewing her custom gold logo from above the entrance. One man held the sign midair as the other peeled off the final letters. TK. Gone. Below the image, a second line in the same careful script. Built with trust. Ended by it. No signature. No PS. No warning. Her knees buckled slightly, and she gripped the edge of the counter, heart thudding against bone like a hollow drum. All this time, she thought there'd be more. One last fight. One last chance to explain herself. One moment where he'd crack and yell and say he still cared, somewhere beneath it all. But that was final. He hadn't just closed the book. He'd mailed her the obituary. A single dollar. Legally, a transaction. Symbolically, an execution. She slid down the cabinet and sat on the cold tile, the envelope still in her lap, check fluttering in her hand. She tried to think of something clever to say, something sharp or sarcastic or bitter. But nothing came. There were no headlines. No interviews. No pity. No brand. No allies. No Graham. Just a receipt. For services rendered. And a silence loud enough to bury her.